Jaya Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Januranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Januranjana. Yamuna Kira Manaj. It's on. Yes, the switch is on. Testing. Yeah. Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janurandana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janurandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jivardhari Yashoda Nandana Brajadhana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajadhana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanajapa Yamuna Tira Yada Madhava Tundavihati Jayadhamana Tundavihati Jayagati Janavalabha Divaradha Jayagati Janavalabha Divaradha Yashoda Sandana Pradana Sandana Yashoda Sandana Pradana Sandana Yamuna Tira Lana Chaha Yamuna Tira Lana Chaha Jaya Radha Kunjabi Savarsi Ayadhara Madhava Kunjabi Savarsi Jayati Janava Girivardhara Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Devarasvati Yashodanandana Prajajanu Sundana Yashodanandana Prajajana Yamuna Kira Savana Yamuna Kira Pranatasti Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Sri Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Jamashpada Pramsa Purjakacharya Shodashata Srimad Divine Grace AC Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Highest Confounded Charya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai Vishnupada Param Sarpuratakachaya Shodashada Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Pramanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 1, titled The Activities of Maharaj Priyavata, text number 15. Ishabrisham hi avarundamahe niga, dukam sukam vaguna karma sangat, astaya tat tat yad ayunkta natash, chakshushmatandya iva niyamana. Ishabrish Samhi Avarunamahe Niga Sukam Vaguna Karma Sangat Astaya Tat Tat Yad Ayunkta Natash Chakshush Matanda Iva Niyamana Ishabrish Vishrishtamhi Avarundamahe Niga Sukam Vaguna Karma Sangat Ashtatat Yad Ayunkta Natash Chakshush Matanda Iva Niyama Isha Abhishritam, created or given by the Lord. He, certainly. Avarundamahe, we have to accept. Anga, my dear Priyavata. Dukam, distress. Sukam, happiness. Va, or guna karma, with quality and work. Sangat, by association. Astaya, being situated in. Tat tat, that condition. It's not working. Yeah, unless you can fiddle with the. It's on. Uh, Sorry about that. We're having some technical difficulties. Astaya, being situated in. Tat tat, that condition. Yat, which body? Ayunktva, he gave. Nata, the Supreme Lord. Chakshush mata, by a person having eyes. Anda, blind man. Eva, like. Niyamana, being conducted. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. My dear Priyavata, according to our association with different modes of material nature, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives us our specific bodies and the happiness and distress we achieve. One must therefore remain situated as he is and be conducted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, exactly as a blind man is led by a person who has eyes with which to see. Report. By material means, one cannot avoid the happiness and distress unique to his particular body. There are 8,400,000 bodily forms, each destined to enjoy and suffer a certain amount of happiness and distress. This we cannot change, for the happiness and distress are ordained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in accordance with whose decision we have received our bodies. Since we cannot avoid the plan of the Supreme Godhead, we must agree to be directed by him, just as a blind man is led by a person who has eyes. Under any circumstance, if we remain in the condition allotted to us by the Supreme Lord and follow his instructions, we will become perfect. The main purpose of life is to follow the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is such instructions that constitute one's religious or occupational duty. In Bhagavad Gita, therefore, Lord Krishna says, Sarva Dharman Pityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Give up all other engagements, simply surrender unto me and follow me. This process of surrendering by following the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not meant for any particular caste or creed. A Brahmana can surrender, and so can a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. Everyone can adopt this process. As stated in the verse, Chakshushma Tanda Iva Niyamanaha. One should follow the Lord the way a blind man follows a person who has eyes. If we follow the Supreme Personality of Godhead by following the direction he gives in the Vedas and Bhagavad Gita, our lives will be successful. The Lord therefore says, Manmana bhavaman bhakto mad yajit mam namaskuru. Am evish yasi satam te pratijane priyosime. Always think of me, become my devotee, and offer respects and obeisances unto me. Then you will certainly come back home, back to Godhead. I promise you this, because you are my very dear friend. This instruction is meant for everyone, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. If anyone from any division of life surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and follows his instructions, his life will be successful. Previous verse has given the analogy of bulls moving under the direction of the driver of a bullock cart. The bulls, being completely surrendered to the driver, remain wherever he wants to place them and eat whatever he wants them to eat. Similarly, being completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we should not aspire for happiness or regret distress. We must be satisfied with the position allotted to us by the Lord. We should follow the path of devotional service and not be dissatisfied with the happiness and distress he has given. People in the material modes of passion and ignorance generally cannot understand the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with its 18, not 18, 8,400,000 forms of life. But the human form affords one the special privilege to understand this plan, engage in devotional service, and elevate one to the highest position of perfection by following the Lord's instructions. The entire world is working under the influence of the modes of material nature, especially ignorance and passion. But if people engage in hearing and chanting about the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, their lives can be successful and they can be elevated to the highest perfection. The Brihanarada Purana, therefore, it is said, Haranama, Haranama, Haranama Kalam. Kalinasta Evanasta, Evanasta Eva Gantir Anyata. In this age of Kali, there's no other way, no other way, no other way for spiritual protection than the holy name, the holy name, the holy name of the Lord. Everyone should be given the chance to hear the holy names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for thus one will gradually come to understand his real position in life and be elevated to the transcendental position above the mode of goodness. This all impediments to his progress will be cut to pieces. In conclusion, therefore, we must be satisfied in whatever position we have been put into by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we should try to engage ourselves in his devotional service. Then our lives will be successful. Om Ganataramandasya, Gnanjana Shalakaya, Chakshmaitamyana Tasma Shri Vivaya Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this verse is the continuation of the arguments put by Lord Brahma to Maharaj Priyavata in trying to convince him to take on the service of running the kingdom. uh, that he was supposed to run, and convincing him to um, give up his renunciation in one sense, at least externally, in order to take on the service of being king. And we can see uh, that Brahma is who's making this argument. It's going through kind of different levels of arguments or different justifications for it. But first, he tells Mars Priyadvata that all living entities are uh, accepting of bodies, uh, and then made a Varnashram Dharma argument. And in this verse, making the argument that one must always follow what is conducted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Was, as it was pointed out multiple times in the verse, there are 8,400,000 bodily forms, what are sometimes called species of life, which is, of course, different than what we consider species by modern taxonomy, given that there are the numbers don't exactly match up. But in any case, there are 8,400,000 forms of life, according to the Vedic analysis. And in each one of these forms of life, there's a certain type of enjoyment that one gets, and a certain type of uh, distress that others get. And what the enjoyment is and what the distress uh, is dependent on what body one has. For example, I was researching a bit last night into various topics concerning beekeeping, since the bees have aroused from their winter slumber. Uh, and I was reading about making a pollinator garden suitable for bees. And many times these include some form of water. And the preferred form of water for bees is actually a dirty puddle in the ground. That is very enjoyable to them. But if I ask, if any human being asks me for water and I point them to a dirty puddle in the ground, then they would probably take it as an insult. That's how dare you point out uh, that this is drinkable water for a human being? Because what gives us happiness and what gives us distress is dependent on the form of life that we got. We obtained some certain form of life due to our past activities, to the karmic reactions that we have accrued from our uh, pious and sinful activities in this life and previous lives. And the one from previous lives will has determined our present body and circumstances in this life. And if we remain under the wheel of samsara, then our activities in this life will help determine a future life, uh, in which we will enjoy a certain amount of happiness or distress. And this is ordained by the laws of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, uh, the laws of karma that he set up. And one cannot avoid this plan. One might escape justice by a material uh, court. There are so many examples of people who have either done something, and everybody knows they've done something, but somehow or other have escaped prosecution uh, by the justice system. And conversely, there are, of course, many people who have been imprisoned falsely or persecuted falsely by the uh, justice system. But the laws of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are infallible, uh, and one cannot avoid them. So it is recommended that uh, among all of the species of life, there's one form of life, one set of forms of life, the human form of life, where one can follow Dharma. One can follow the Vedic injunctions given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Uh, and this, we heard about this yesterday, talking about Varnashram Dharma, where according to one's bodily situation, one's form of life, uh, one's position in society, one has a certain duty. Brahmana has a different duty than a Kshatriya, different than a Vaishya, and different than a Shudra. And uh, in this way, the social order can go on. The every varna, every occupational duty, every occupational position knows their duty, and one can have a social order uh, dependent on which is more cohesive. However, this is not the highest position. We hear about this in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and talks between Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy, where Ramananda Roy is talking about various positions and what's the highest goal of life. And uh, at one point, he says that following one's occupational duty, following Varnashram Dharma, is the highest good, the highest goal. And Lord Chaitanya basically says, that is good, but there's something higher. Give me something else. And the position that we want to attain is actually beyond Varnashram Dharma. Is beyond any material um, process. We read this verse from the Brihan Naradiya Purana uh, that says that in the age of Kali, there's no other way to spiritual perfection than chanting the holy name of the Lord. Where, and we might not recognize this. Uh, we might think there are so many other processes to uh, gain the favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or to mitigate the distresses of the material world. Uh, we might be attached to or try to take on so many other processes. This process to relieve distress or that process to relieve distress. And they might help in one way or another. If you have a broken leg, go to a doctor. But we shouldn't think that they will relieve all of our distresses. There's only one way to relieve all of the distresses of the material world or of material life, and that is taking to the process of Krishna consciousness and seriously practicing and becoming advanced in this process. Because any other process other than Krishna consciousness, one is under the purview of the material energy, where there is a process of happiness and distress. and one will fall under the waves of distress uh, with if one engages in the process. So it might seem that there are, in one sense, contradictory instructions going on. And on the one hand, uh, we are given the instructions that one should follow one's varnashram dharma, that one should follow dharma according to one's varna and ashram. Uh, on the other hand, we hear that the only occupational duty or the only uh, thing that we should be engaged in is the direct devotional service of the Lord. And we also hear many times that a devotee of Vaishnava is beyond the position of even a brahmana. This is true. Devotee can act in whatever varna one he that he needs to, or even beyond uh, the varnashram system altogether. We see many cases of this throughout our shastras. Uh, for example, Parashuram, he was a brahmana by caste, but acted as a kshatriya because that was the need. That he acted in that manner in order to chastise uh, the degraded Shastriyas of his time that were oppressing the people. Uh, and likewise, we see so many examples of various avadutas throughout our sastras. Through later in the fifth canto, we'll read about Jadabara, who, even though externally was a Brahmana, he was born in a Brahmana family, he chose not to follow the rules and the regulations because he was beyond the platform of Varnashram Dharma. However, one cannot artificially uh, take on this platform. One can't just say, oh, I'm a devotee, I am beyond this material platform, uh, so I don't have to follow any sort of dharma. One can't make that. One can't attain that position just by saying it. One has to actually attain that level of spiritual advancement before acting in a sort of way. Because Prabhupada wanted us to follow Varnashram Dharma. He called it the second half of his movement. The first half was, of course, establishing the chanting of Hare Krishna, and then the uh, second half is establishing Varnashram Dharma, the Vedic social system that will give the best platform for coming to Krishna consciousness. And he said he left it to his disciples and grand disciples and great grand disciples and so on to actually establish the second half, where we can actually have a system where everybody is engaged according to their propensity, to their strengths, so to speak, and can understand that uh, in that position, there's a certain duty that they have to perform and a certain way of life that they live. And if one is actually of that varna, of that occupational position, it won't be peaceful in doing that. Rather than the modern kind of system of education, employment, etc., where there's more or less everybody does the same thing. The education system, in many places and in many ways, is a one size fits all uh, affair. The employment uh, sphere, most people will probably end up working in some office somewhere, uh, and which is basically the same work, no matter what kind of office you happen to be working in. Uh, and in this way, the distinctions between Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra have been broken down. However, in a proper system, this hierarchy will be, this division will be uh, implemented, and people can be engaged according to their propensities. Because there are various ways that one can approach Krishna. Of course, the highest way is bhakti yoga, which is acting according to one's are acting according to whatever is needed for the service of the Lord. And this is the highest platform. Is that it doesn't matter if it is my propensity, if it is not my propensity, I will act according to this uh, need to perform the service of the Lord, whatever that service may be. Uh, One example I can think of that is my Guru Maharaj, Avamrita Swami. He, I've heard him describe in lectures that when he first joined the temple, he really did not like going on books and would barely distribute any books even when he went out. But still, he went out to please Srila Prabhupada. Uh, and in that way, of course, pleased his spiritual master and eventually did start doing lots of books and expanded his service. And any one of us can take up this opportunity to do the needful in serving Srila Prabhupada's mission and serving Krishna. And uh, one can make very quick advancement that way. But not everybody wants to be engaged like that. Some people want to say, okay, I will work according to my propensities and offer the result of my activities to Krishna. That's the karma yoga form. And in doing so, one of course makes lots of spiritual advancement. Uh, so it all depends on what position one wants to be in. So we have a system of uh, Varnashram Dharma. We have a social system uh, that we should try to establish. You know, it's described in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam and other shastras, and it's the desire of the spiritual master that we establish this social system of not just Varnashram, but Daivi Varnashram. That is Varnashram with Krishna at the center, so that one can form one's occupational duty, but at the same time surrender, because the ultimate process is surrendering to Krishna in whatever way one can. Uh, if one wants to operate on the platform of Anashram Dharma, that's very nice and needed. You know, a Brahmana can perform his duty, a Kshatriya can perform his duty, but we also need to go beyond the platform of materialistic Dharma. Because even though it is the best social system, the Varnashram Dharma social system is still material. And we need to we do need to move into the spiritual energy, into the spiritual way of doing things, which, as I've stated before, is um, doing the needful no matter what one's propensities or what's one's materialistic position is. And we do this by hearing and chanting the voice of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is stated in the purport that the entire world is working under the influence of the modes of material nature, especially passion or ignorance, passion and ignorance. But if we hear the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and if we chant them, then we can successfully elevate ourselves to the level of highest spiritual perfection. And this is actually the uh, greatest benediction of living in Kali Yuga. Uh, there will be no argument that Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults. There's so many uh, poor circumstances, so many unfavorable circumstances in Kali Yuga. You know, we've been talking about Varnashram Dharma. There's the breakdown of practically every sector of Varnashram Dharma in Kali Yuga. The Brahmanas, or so-called Brahmanas, are not actually giving spiritual knowledge or good advice. Uh, and in many cases, they don't know the actual good advice themselves. Uh, One example that comes to mind with that is I don't know how many people are familiar with this public figure, Jordan Peterson, who, you know, he's kind of an intellectual sort of person and is giving advice to many people. But because he does not have transcendental knowledge, he sometimes gives good advice and sometimes bad advice because he doesn't have the highest knowledge. For example, many people find that listening to his lectures helps them sort out their lives in one way or another. But he also, so he takes on some sort of Brahminical or pseudo-Brahminical role, but he also advocates a 100% beef diet. Uh, so we see that, you know, those who have taken on this role of giving advice do not know the actual way of giving advice. The Kshatriyas, of course, the administrators, don't protect the citizens. Instead, they exploit the citizens. And of course, for the most part, the Vaishyas, those engaged in farming, economic development, and things like that, uh, instead of protecting the cow, they slaughter the cow. Instead of growing good natural foodstuffs, they grow genetically modified crops or processed foods. Uh, so there's so many mm, unfortunate situations in Kali Yuga, but we do have the ultimate fortunate situation as well, and that is the chanting of the holy name. And in this way, we can actually become elevated to a position beyond Varnashram Dharma. So there's two sides of the coin. One is two sides of the coin and two halves of the movement. One is, of course, the spiritual side, which is beyond any material impediments. And then there's the establishing of Varnashram Dharma. I'll admit that I don't have a complete plan worked out myself. I know, shocker, of implementing Varnashram Dharma and how to do that, but it is something that we should be thinking about, uh, both here on the farm as we try to build a more natural and Krishna conscious community, as opposed to what is in the modern Kali Yuga world, while keeping Krishna in the center. And as devotees, as disciples, grand disciples, followers of Srila Prabhupada, we should be meditating on this instruction of uh, trying to establish Varnashram Dharma in a Krishna conscious way and establishing a system where everybody can uh, engage both materially and spiritually in a natural way that will help them make advancements in whatever field of activities they uh, choose to engage themselves in. Whether that's the material field of activities, spiritual field of activities, or some combination of the two. So that's all that I have. The class was a bit all over the place at times. But if anybody has any comments about Varnashram Dharma, its relation to spiritual life, or establishing the relationship between the two movements, I'd like to hear people's thoughts.
I don't have a comment about any of those topics, but I would like to commend you. The class was very nice, but there's a slight fallacy in your argument about Jordan Peterson, which I'm very familiar with.
Okay.
He is a clinical psychologist who, yes, maybe has taken by default the position of a Brahmin and giving advice in society.
Yeah.
However, when he refers to his diet, many times I heard him saying, yes, unfortunately, my diet is all beef. And I'm also following my daughter's diet because we got all the diseases that we had, and they were quite serious, went into remission when we started this diet. And he always uses the word, or most of the time, unfortunate diet, unfortunate position. So he's not by any means advocating such a thing. And whether sometimes gives good advice, sometimes bad advice. One thing that he does is quite a bit of research before he answers anything. He knows his subjects quite well, and he quotes the social sciences and the statistics. So I don't think he's properly depicted. But otherwise, class was fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I do. I've heard him speak before. I obviously really pay much attention to. I like when he talks about diet. I usually just skip that portion. But yeah, I guess I've heard secondhand that he does it. So thank you for your correction, Prabhu. I see Tarka Prabhu has raised his hand. Would you like to make a comment?
I'll make a comment or two. You were talking about the 8,400,000 species, and said that there is not an exact Vedic the scientists evidently have got some other number. My understanding is that so far the scientists have cataloged only about 15%, what they estimate to be 15% of the species on the planet. They estimate that 86% of the Earth species have yet to be described or even discovered. Their estimate, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think they are estimating 8.7 million species, which is a little bit more than our 8,400,000, but they don't actually know. It appears to me to be basically a wild guess. They really have no idea. So it's just an estimate. So you agree with that. Apart from that, with regards to Varnashram Dharma, Srila Prabhupada has stated on various occasions that the Vaishnavas, the devotees, actually have nothing to do with Varnashram. That Varnashram is really meant for the non-devotees. Means of gradual elevation for the, not necessary for the Vaishnavas, but we take advantage of it anyway. Two reasons. One is that we want to set an example, and also it's just a practical way to organize. We follow to some extent, but not very strictly. Ordinarily, it would be the duty of a king to strictly enforce the principles of Varnashram. If someone is acting outside the parameters of their particular Varna, they are punishable. We don't do that. We work across all different Varnas as the need dictates. So our position on Varnashram is different in that regard. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he sums up the purport by saying that, in conclusion, therefore, we must be satisfied in whatever position we have been put into by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we should try to engage ourselves in this devotional service, then our lives will be successful. So he gives an example that Brahma initiated the example of utilizing bulls, and that example is given here in Srila Prabhupada's purport. Also, he expands on that same example. The same was done by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. And his angle is that, he's talking about how living entities are enjoying and suffering different types of conditions based upon their contact with the modes of nature. And it seemed to me that his emphasis was that we should not be blaming God for our problems. And in fact, there are some who will argue like that well, if there is a God, he must not be a very kind or benevolent God, because the conditions that we're subject to, there's so much suffering in the world. So how can God be all good? And so that's an age-old argument. And Vishwanath Chakravarti attempts to address that. And Srila Prabhupada touches on it also. Vishwanath Chakravarti says, we are dependent even in enjoying the results of karma. We receive happiness and distress as given by the Lord. And he's what he's expressing here is, this is the line of logic that Lord Brahma was expressing to Priyavrata. He says, we receive happiness and distress is given by the Lord, but this is not some fault in the Lord. It arises from our attachment to actions connected to the gunas. Among All oxen, which are equal as far as common characteristics are concerned, according to the amount of good or bad actions, their master gives them rice with milk and ghee and puts them in the best stables, or gives them rough chickpeas and dal, or grass and corn, or he may put them outside in the mud and sun without food, beat them and scold them, and feed them straw and leaves. In what manner should we accept these results? Whatever the master gives as good or bad results, only according to our good and bad qualities, we should accept. What fault is there in the master? We should accept this with faith. One should see this as a good quality in the Lord. And he gives the following example. He says, will the blind man scold the man with vision, who, while leading him on the path, takes him on the path full of burning sun instead of on the shady path, because he sees that there are thorns on the shady path? The man with sight is the well-wisher of the blind man. The person with faith will praise the Lord. So that's his angle. That's the way he chose to address that. I thought that was interesting. Anyway, that's all I've got. Thank you for your class. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu, for your comments. Thought I saw Kaylee's hand up earlier. That's down now. Do you still have a question?
Yeah, no, I was just going to comment, but it's okay. Yeah, thank you for the class. I really appreciated all the comments made by everybody.
I thank you. We have 2 minutes, it looks like, until the door is open, assuming everything is on time. So if there are no more comments, then Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.